This is Alfred Hitchcock speaking. In the past, I have introduced you to many kinds of people. Murderers, thieves, swindlers. Now I'd like you to meet an entirely different person. An average sort of fellow, who leads a very normal life. The big difference is that his story is true.
This is Foreign Correspondence, deeper into Hitchcock.
Hello, welcome to the 44th episode of Foreign Correspondence, Deeper into Hitchcock podcast. My name is Michał Oleszczyk. I teach film at the University of Warsaw, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Sebastian Smoliński.
Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure to hear you again.
Yes, and we are speaking to you after quite a break, because the film that we last discussed, the 1956 version of The Man Who Knew Too Much, we recorded that episode in August 2025, and it's already late January of 2026, so it's a longer pause than usual, but we've both been busy, and these films are both from 1956. Men Who Knew Too Much opened in the summer of 1956 in the States, and The Wrong Man, the film that we will talk about today, opened in December 1956. I said we've been busy. I have to say that I'm in awe of my friend's new line of work. Sebastian is a full-fledged distributor here in Poland who is actually distributing film classics. So I guess this is a very, very busy job for you. But you are discovering new things about film, about the audience. And the first question for me would be, would you have been happy with The Wrong Man as a distributor back in 1956, knowing Alfred Hitchcock's previous work? Would you have been happy with this film as a distributor from the audience point of view?
That's a great question, and I'm amazed, Michał, by your, let's say, perceptivity, because of course this is exactly what I was thinking about half an hour ago, before we launched the Zoom together this time. But yes, that's a great question, and I was, for the first time, I think this is the 44th time we're discussing a movie, right? And I think for the first time I focused on watching the original trailer and thinking it through for The Wrong Man. So obviously I'm tainted now a bit. I'm distorted by this distributor's perspective. Of course, I'm distributing classics, so the questions I pose to myself are, is this movie recognizable enough? Will people want to revisit it, and so on? Here it's a different situation because you have a brand new Hitchcock movie, and so there are like two answers, I think, to your questions. One is, would I be happy with the promotional campaign that was made around the movie, and would I be happy as a distributor with the movie? And I think I wouldn't be happy with the movie in 1956. I would be very surprised as a producer or distributor after, To Catch a Thief, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Rear Window, great color, Hitchcock's in color, and both enjoyable and thrilling. I must tell you, I would be puzzled. And I think it's reflected in the campaign precisely. The trailer, I don't know if you saw the original trailer, but it's one of these great trailers. I don't know if it's the first situation like that. We would have to double check it, but it's the whole trailer, the whole 150-second trailer is narrated by Hitchcock, and like in the first scene of the movie, he appears at the beginning of the trailer, and with his very recognizable voice is sparing the narrative, saying, yes, this is my first movie based on real facts, and this happened like that. And he's describing the movie, so it feels a bit like like an introduction to Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I think at this precisely at this moment of mid-50s, it's really the let's say the border between TV and cinema is kind of undermined. Also, it is the moment when Hitchcock's TV career enforces his theatrical career, when he's recognizable both as a movie director and TV director, and you can, I think, see that in this trailer that he presents. It's like Alfred Hitchcock presents, but on a theatrical scale.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to showcase your new perspective, the distributor's perspective, because part of the beauty of a podcast like this, which is a project that we are doing over many years, and it's not a rushed project. We started this in 2019. We are changing, and we are getting new perspective on those films. So this is why I wanted to showcase this. And let's focus a little bit on what The Wrong Man is about. This is a film that is actually 50 years. Not 50 years old, but 70 years
70.
So it opened 70 years ago in 1956. It bears the distinction of being the only Alfred Hitchcock film based on a factual story. All other films are adaptations of fictional tales, even though sometimes they were inspired by some real life events. Like Psycho, for example, at Gain, but this is the first really based on a real story, and the main character, played by Henry Fonda, is actually bears the name of the real character, Christopher Emmanuel Manny Balestrero, and this is a seemingly Hitchcockian plot of an innocent man who is falsely accused, this time of a series of holdups of stores in New York City, mainly in Queens area in the 50s. And this was a real case that Life magazine actually wrote about, and it was very notorious because the man was actually imprisoned for a while, and it took some time to clean his name, to exonerate him. And Henry Fonda plays the main character. Manny Vera Miles plays his wife Rose, and it all starts very innocently because he tries to get some money from the insurance policy to do her dental work. He's a musician. He plays in the famous Stork Club in New York City. And it's really a case of mistaken identity, in that one of the insurance company employees mistakenly takes him for a man who held up the very same office sometime before, and from that it's a domino effect of false recognitions, of police provocations in which they force him to visit the places of the holdups, and they keep getting more and more evidence of him being actually the culprit. He's imprisoned, and then through a very grueling process, and also again by chance, he's exonerated once the actual criminal gets caught. However, his life is in ruins because his wife suffered from a mental breakdown, and the last scene really is of him trying to talk to his wife, who is not really present. She's completely shaken, traumatized, and he's trying to talk to her. Let's try to rebuild our lives. I am nothing without you. So it's also a story of a family that suffers through this very, very traumatic event. The final caption on the screen tells us that everything actually turned out well, that after 2 years, Mrs. Balestrero actually regained her mental health and everything was fine. However, this is not the image that we are left with. We are left with this very harrowing conversation between husband and wife. And so this is the story, and I can tell you this is my favorite type of foreign correspondence deeper into Hitchcock episode, because I haven't seen this film in a long time. I only saw it once, many years ago. I think it was around 30 years ago on TV in Poland, and this is the first time after 30 years that I saw it again. And my first take is that it's a surprising film in Hitchcock's oeuvre because of how serious and how sombre it is. It's very in this low key of observation of also the main character, the main performance by Henry Fonda is extremely low key. There's none of the histrionics. There's none of the witticisms. Manny Balestrero. And this is my first take, and I wonder what you will say. Manny Balestrero accepts his condition of an accused man with a uncanny amount of passivity. He knows that he's innocent and he professes his innocence, and yet he never once tries to rebel, to escape, to make a joke, or to make a fiery speech that, he's being treated unjustly. No, he knows that he's innocent, but he accepts the proceedings of the policeman and of the judiciary system, and this passivity of his is the first thing that strikes me about this film, because there are many wrong men in Hitchcock's films, like Roger Thornhill and many others, but they all react to this whole wrong man situation with in a very lively way. They profess their innocence. They said, "Oh, it's crazy. It cannot really happen," and this character actually goes along with it. And this is my first observation. And in that, it's unlike any other Hitchcock film, I have to say. And I think I like it for that reason, but also it makes it a little bit problematic as a Hitchcock film. I don't know, what's your first reaction to it?
I agree. It's a great observation. You use the word sombre to describe the mood. I was thinking of this lugubrious tone. Nobody's dying within the movie, but I think it has this it's haunted by some deathly notions, like he may die as a suspect, maybe maybe not for this kind of crime, but his wife, as you mentioned, is losing her mind, if we may use this phrase, which of course I wonder what does it mean, right? Lose one's mind, especially in this 1950s context. But there is something haunting about this movie, something very depressing, of course, some notion of cruel universe that I think we've discussed several times when we were discussing Hitch's movies. And I was thinking about the style and about Fonda's character, and I wondered if in 1950s Hitchcock's decision to use black and white doesn't signify something, doesn't signify his seriousness of tone. Of course, I Confess is the movie still from the black and white era, but it's hard for me to imagine this movie as a color film, right? Some other Hitchcock movies you can imagine as films shot in color, but I Confess with a similar, I don't know, but I would say also that Montgomery's character is also quite passive, And of course, I Confess, like the Wrong Man, are both full of religious imagery, and they are connected to the question of faith, the notion of the prayer and guilt and so on. So I was thinking, I don't know if you would agree that there is something to it, like this makeup trilogy of Hitchcock, I Confess, The Wrong Man, and Psycho, because in both, in all three instances, we have a somewhat passive character. Norman Bates is very active in some areas, but he's passive in the sense that he's totally accepting his fate of a son, of a cursed son, or of a mother whose life must be prolonged by other means. But there's, I think, some passivity and some notion of a cruel world in all three of these films, and they are quite serious, all three of them. I Confess, The Wrong Man, and Psycho. So I was thinking about this plane, but I agree with you that there is much passivity in this character, but I think it's also because he's a very unlikely hero for Hitchcock, in the sense that he's a really ordinary family man. And even if you compare him with James Stewart from The Man Who Knew Too Much, who is, a respected doctor, who's traveling abroad, who has this crazy sense of humor, and is a funny person to be with. Here you have a guy who's really very ordinary, not in the sense that his life is ordinary, like Cary Grant's life in North by Northwest, but he's no fun. He's a very honest, earnest guy, doing his job 9 to 5. Although he's an artist or a musician, he has a 9 to 5 job, so he's like a ordinary 1950s grey flannel suit man who is suddenly thrown into these weird circumstances, and I think it somehow contributes to this passivity and to this to the style that Henry Fonda uses to play him. This certain distance that we have from this character, although on the surface we are looking at everything from his perspective. So we have this subjective perspective, but I don't think we really have contact with his emotions, states of minds. It's suggested visually at some points, but I think he's, it's more a story about his wife. I mean, this is let's say, the emotional essence of the movie, not necessarily the fate of the man. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yes, I agree with most things that you said. The one thing that I don't entirely agree with is I wouldn't call him this grey flannel suit man, because he is a musician, and he doesn't really work 9 to 5, because we see him working during the night. He has a
5 to 1.
Exactly. And I think that it's significant that it's not a guy who goes to the office in the morning and says goodbye honey and he comes back at 5. He leaves his home at 5, and we meet him as he is doing his shift at this start club, and he's a musician. And in this fascinating first 10 minutes of this film, we see this ordinary nightlife of working class New York, because I as someone who loves New York a lot, I would say that it's really fascinating to see those late night trains, late night subway, this little luncheonette which serves meals at every time of the day, and he has this very late meal. He's a creature of the night because of the work that he does. He's very straight-laced. He's not an adventurer. He's Henry Fonda, and he talks to his sons, and he's a very patient father, and for all we know, he's a very good husband. But he lives during the night, and thanks to this, I think it's really beautifully shown, this sort of realistic portrayal of New York at that time. And also, I want to comment on what you said about black and white, that it's fascinating that Hitchcock, after those colorful, lush films that we talked about here, even after Men Who Knew Too Much, VistaVision, Technicolor, that he makes this black and white film, which not only begins with Hitchcock addressing us directly, we will talk about that in a second, but the real opening of the film, the opening credits of the film, are projected against the backdrop of the Stork Club, of the nightclub, probably one of the most famous nightclubs of that era. It was featured in many other films. The manager of the club is thanked in the final credits. But what I mean is we see this colorful nightlife of 1950s in the opening, people having good time, having good drinks, glamorous people, having this really adult entertainment, late night entertainment. And this is exactly like Hitchcock showing, this is what my previous 4 films were like. This was this adult entertainment, drinks, To Catch a Thief, and all this glamour. But this film will look on the other side. This film will show you this ordinary musician. He's not a great musician. We don't know anything about his real talents. He's just there, he's doing his job. So when I'm thinking about the book that we both love, Foster Hirsch's book about 1950s in Hollywood. And I have to confess, I didn't consult this book before this recording, so I'm sure Foster Hirsch writes something about The Wrong Man. But I want to say that, if we have this image of this glamorous Technicolor films of 1950s, and Hitchcock also participated in that, this film takes a step back, and it shows, okay, there's this Stork Club, there's this fantastic, glamorous life, but I will show you the guy who actually lives in black and white. He goes back to his home at 2 a.m., and, he has this little, late night dinner at the luncheonette. So what I'm trying to say, Hitchcock is making a step towards real life, real people, everyday people. Probably he's making a step back to something that he knew, because he was also from lower middle class. He wasn't born into privilege, and he's with this common guy in this film. And I love the notion of the trilogy that you mentioned, because one of my favorite quotes in Psycho is when Marion Crane, at the beginning, she talks to Hitchcock's daughter at work, and she says, "Oh, you should get some pills, for the bad mood." And Marion Crane says, "You can't buy off unhappiness with pills. That you can take as many pills as you like, but the unhappiness will remain." And this is exactly what you said about this trilogy. It's a trilogy of unhappiness, of fate, of something that you cannot buy off. It hangs above you. And a very short quotation from Richard Brody, who I have to say is becoming my favorite contemporary critic right now. He's on an amazing roll, but this is...
He's on fire.
He's
really on fire.
But this is from 10 years ago. So Hitchcock's ultimate point in The Wrong Man evokes cosmic terror. Innocence is merely a trick of paperwork, whereas guilt is the human condition. So I will leave you. With that.
That's a great quote. Very Hitchcockian.
Brodian
also.
And very Hitchcockian at the same time. And I want to just ask you, what do you make of this opening appearance by Hitchcock? Because this is the only time in a feature film that he addresses us. He talks directly to us. And he doesn't appear in a cameo later on. There was a cameo that he actually cut. So he decided that this film was serious enough for him to address us. But can we really accept this idea that he's being serious when he tells us, this is a real story and stuff?
Well, we shouldn't, right? I don't know. I must say, I cannot find justification for it that would be convincing for me. I mean, of course, it's the opening of the movie, so you can do everything. It's not, you're not really in the world of fiction, in the world of story yet, so you may do any kind of introduction. Remember that in the same year, Cecil B. DeMille, opened 10 Commandments by showing in front of the curtain, as far as I remember. So it was this moment when you open, at least in this case, big spectacles by saying a few words about yourself, about your work. It's not the case here. I'm not entirely convinced by, accepting the pedigree of this movie as, American neorealism, or as a late example of these docudramas that were devised in the 1940s, Louis de Rochemont movies, and Call Northside 777 that Hitchcock himself mentions. I'm not entirely convinced that For example, the appearance of Hitchcock is the result of that. These previous movies often had this kind of straightforward opening in which a real person would tell you, oh, it's a real story, but we fictionalized some elements, but basically it's true. So I'm not really convinced by that. I'm not sure how to read Hitchcock's appearance. I don't know why he really is doing that, because I think the credits are strong enough. I think it's one of my favorite credit sequence. As you beautifully put it, we have this luxurious club, like almost like a restaurant in Marrakesh in the previous movie, and then suddenly we it's like another example of Where is Waldo in a Hitchcock movie. I didn't recognize Henry Fonda for the first minute. I was focused on the people in the front of the frame. I was focused on the credits, and then of course he's there as a bass player, right? So I don't know. Why do you think there's a Hitchcock introduction in this movie?
I think he's definitely trying out something new, and he probably felt it, because it's really unlike any other film that he made. So maybe he was, from distribution point of view, trying to maybe warn the audience that this will be less fun than usual. So, I'm not winking to you. I'm just here to present you with this real life story.
But it's too late. They are already there.
Well, yes, but they can come out happy or unhappy, and I think this is preparing them.
I see.
Hear me out. This will be different. This will now for something different.
Yeah. Yeah, but
spoken like a true
yes,
distributor. They are already there.
Yeah, you're right.
The question is, will they recommend the film to friends?
That's a good question. But when you look at the poster, promising real life story, but also promising suspense, thrills. The promise of the trailer and of the poster is that it's a real life story, but it's as thrilling as all previous Hitchcock movies. When obviously it's not. It's not thrilling in this sense. I'm sorry, but the real suspense is when Vera Miles will go mad, right? It's the only example of suspense, because on one level we know that it must have a happy ending, because it's still 1950s Hollywood. So the question is, how will it happen? But so in this sense, I think it's a trick. The promotional campaign was a trick, because it was. I totally agree with you. It was a very unusual movie, a very unusual tone. I would be very surprised if I were 16-year-old who loved Rear Window. I would be very, very surprised to see the Wrong Man, which is really like intimidating in its pessimism. It's like a very pessimistic. For the 1950s cinema, it's, I think, very, very pessimistic in its, as Brody mentions, it's like this cosmic injustice or whatever. Sorry, because I jumped in your.
It's perfect. We will never know, and probably maybe somebody will write about it more. We said many times that there are so many books about Hitchcock, and there are books about what he liked to eat, and how food influenced his films. But the book I would kill for would be the screening sort of memos, like what did he watch? Like there are those presidential records of what American presidents watched when they were in office, right? Because they used the White House screening room. The book that I would kill for would be like the screening log of Alfred Hitchcock. What he actually watched, and because this could answer many questions. We know, for example, that he was blown away by Le Diabolique, the Henri-Georges Clouzot film, which actually made him a little jealous, as the story says, and then he adapted the same writers for Vertigo, blah blah blah. But here, I'm sure that he watched some films from Europe at that time. I'm not pushing the neorealist agenda, but I think that he might have reacted to some French films by André Caillat, maybe, those procedurals by Clouzot also, that showed the process and that focused on this very meticulous observation of the process. Glenn Kenny, in his piece on The Wrong Man, he says that he sees some similarities between the film that was made at the exact same time, A Man Escaped by Bresson. The Bressonian notion of this, basically showing every gesture. When Manny is imprisoned, we see the procedure of taking the fingerprints, and it's all, in big close-ups. It takes time. It's a very long sequence with almost no words. So I think that he might have been reacting to something that was happening at the movies at that time. And he also, I think, prefigured some of the films that were later, those very procedure-oriented films like Jean-Pierre Melville, Francesco Rossi, or even Catherine Bigelow. This is a film in which he makes drama of the procedure of time actually slowing down, of the guy being taken to his cell, and of every step reverberating in our head, and of every single moment counting. So, to answer your question, I think he addresses the audience because maybe he wants just to let them know this won't be the usual Hitchcock picture. Don't expect jokes. Maybe. But you mentioned Vera Miles, and I want to ask about this portrayal of marriage in this film, because this is something that we often talk about. We were just, in Rare Window, we had a marriage in the making, but here it's incredible how quickly this marriage sort of breaks down. This crisis really, it's everything's fine to hell, basically. Like, how do you look at this portrayal of a husband and wife, Henry Fonda and Vera Miles, in this film?
Patrick McGilligan writes that Vera Miles was supposed to be the first star minted by Hitchcock, the first American star, made, quote, end of quote, from scratch by Hitchcock, like a Svengali, right? So, and of course we know what happened next, that he was disappointed with the fact that Vera Miles couldn't star in Vertigo, his next film.
Because of pregnancy.
Yes, because of pregnancy. So I think she's very important here on many levels, and I think she's, let's say, beautifully carried by Hitchcock through the movie. But I liked the first scene we see them together. I think it's quite beautiful, but I think it's also quite neorealist. To counterpoint what I said, that I don't believe in these huge inspirations from neorealism. I know they were, and it's again, it's noted that he was watching Rossellini's movies, and as you mentioned, great references. I didn't think about Bresson, but it makes sense. It's the most Bressonian of Hitchcock's movies. But the first scene, which is also interesting in terms of light, because, as you mentioned, he's the creature of the night, so he comes back home, and it's already very dark. The bedroom is dark. She's lying on her bed, and she has, if not toothache, then some problems with teeth. And the whole scene is like about the discussion about how will we pay the dentist. So it's very mundane and very moving in the way that, their reaction goes. They somehow try to maneuver it in dialogue, that, okay, you should do it, but how will we pay for it? And we know he's concerned, but he doesn't really show it. I think it's beautifully done, and you can see that it's a let's say good marriage, but maybe there is this tension underneath the whole time that their life is not really what they were promised by society, right? So I think that maybe this may be the reason why this mental breakdown, or this deterioration of this relationship goes so fast, right? That there was this tension from the beginning. It was a good life, but it wasn't a perfect life. Maybe in the 1950s you want a perfect life when you're a mother of two living in New York. I don't know. I think that there is this economic tension in this family from the beginning, right? That they feel pressed. There is suggestion of his gambling, and I think we never know how real it really is, right? Because he says, "Oh, maybe I was at the races 2 or 3 times," right? He was borrowing money, so I think it's like a neo-realist family in this way, right? McGilligan also writes the story that Hitchcock was watching The Bicycle Thieves with his Italian housekeeper, and she was apparently very bored by it. But it's just an anecdote. But you can see in this character of Henry Fonda, this father or a family man who is not really, let's say, not really satisfying all the needs of the family. And I think there is this feeling. I don't know if that answers your question about Vera Miles. There is a new book about her, and I think we can say hello to the author. I will mention him in a moment because he actually contacted us a while back. But maybe you will offer your take.
Well, I hope
to that first.
To hear more about this book, and I very much hope that maybe we can invite the author for the Psycho episode. That would be amazing.
Vera Miles, The Hitchcock Blonde Who Got Away.
Okay.
Christopher McKittrick. It's a new book published in 2025. First full-length biography of Vera Miles. We didn't catch up with it yet, but maybe it's something for the Psycho episode.
Yes, I would love that, absolutely. No, I'm really moved by how unglamorous those characters are in this film. We come off Grace Kelly and Doris Day, those 1950s icons, all shot by Hitchcock in Technicolor, and here we have this mundane everyday life. Henry Fonda characters is really he looks sad in the film, and he looks sad even before he's being accused, falsely. So it's like he's going through the motions. He's clearly a religious man, and it plays a big part later on. But it's like really, there's something sad about them, I would say, from the beginning. That everyday life is really this mundane stuff. Talking about dental insurance. That there's no glamour, there's no idea of adventure. That life is what it is. The kids bicker because one kid is annoying the other kid, and it's this everyday life for our character, and I would argue that it's even stronger because he plays at this glamorous club, and he sees folks having wonderful time and laughing and living the high life, and his life is not part of that. So I think that it's very real. It's quite moving. And the fact that he's played by Henry Fonda also adds to this a lot, because Fonda brings with him certain gravity, this sense of inner life, but also of something very stoic. He was stoic as Wyatt Earp and as Tom Joad, when facing the Great Depression, and as juror in 12 Angry Men, which is a year later. And here, there's this stoicism of everyday life, which is, on some level, it's really disappointing. Like it doesn't bring this big, fireworks. It's just there. It's every day. And today it's the dentist, and tomorrow it will be, your knee will be hurting. So, and in a way, this false accusation brings a little bit of distraction into this life. Like there's something happening at least. And I'm not saying that it's happy with this, but at least it brings this jolt to his life. But for me, I wanted to touch about this religious aspect, because we have the rosary, he's playing the rosary, and of course many people comment that this is the most Catholic film that he ever made. However, and this is something that I thought about even at the first screening, I remember this, for me this religious element is very strange, because yes, it is a Catholic film, there is a Catholic mother who tells him you should pray, for your case and stuff. And then there's this shot in which he prays, and it's juxtaposed against the shot of the actual criminal who is about to commit another crime. This is the first time that we see the guy in the film. The first time we know that he's supposed to look like Henry Fonda. But I have a theological question. What is happening here? Like, what exactly is Henry Fonda praying for? Is he praying for the other guy to be led into temptation? Oh, may the guy strike again. Oh God, please lead him into temptation and make him commit another crime, because then I will be exonerated, right? It's very clear, this connection between this act of prayer and this guy committing another crime. And if you are even a cursory Catholic, you know that the most important prayer is Our Father, which is lead us not into temptation. And it's very, very controversial, because there are many versions of it, like, how can God lead anyone into temptation? The devil does that, right? So the different languages dealt with this part of the prayer very differently. And here we see Henry Fonda is praying, and the other guy is committing a sin. So did God push him towards the sin? Did he say, yeah, rob that store, rob that little lady? This is a theological question that makes me ask, maybe Henry Fonda is praying to the devil in that scene, saying like, oh, let's do anything, let something happen that will take me out of this predicament, even if it means for that other guy to commit a sin. Okay, I shut up because I talk too much. So, but let's talk about
please.
Prayer, because it's the biggest turning point in the film. This is the moment when actually the guy does something that exonerates our guy. So, how did you see this scene of prayer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a brilliant reading, or brilliant, let's say, questioning of the movie. We know that Hitchcock was apparently very proud of this scene. In Hitchcock-Truffaut conversation, which is interesting in the way, of course, that Hitchcock will never reveal the extent of his religious feelings or values in a straightforward sense. And he mentions, contrary to the movie, like few years later, he mentions that, probably the real wife of the character is still in an asylum, which is striking, right? Because it's a direct information for us that the last card in the movie is just pure Hollywood, right? To somehow soften the message. But I'm not sure what is he praying for, because it's also interesting in this film that it's rarely pointed out to or emphasized that the real criminal is there. Apparently, it's not the point of the movie. So it's not a movie. It's not like Frenzy, or I don't know, North by Northwest, that of course we know that, or I Confess, we know that our protagonist is innocent, and the stake of the narrative is to find the real killer, right? It's or real criminal, and it's not the case here, which is fascinating. I actually forgot after 1 hour of the movie. I forgot that there is a real criminal, because I would say the Kafkaesque sense of it all is so striking that we really don't care that there is some real solution, that there is a real person, because the whole narrative kind of pushes us into this entrapment, and the state of entrapment is let's say the topic in itself. So I wonder if we really may call it a Catholic movie, right? Because we had between ourselves 1 or 2 religious conversations over the years, and I know, for example, how forgiveness is something important to you as a theme, right, and as a value in life. And I don't think we have forgiveness here, for example, right? There's this very striking scene towards the end I mean, striking in the way how Hitchcock shot it when the exonerated Henry Fonda is meeting these two ladies who accidentally pointed to him, and their interaction is not one of I am sorry or I forgive you. No, there is this it's like a double guilt. Like he felt guilty. Exactly. So it's not a, let's say it's not a Catholic movie finale when they say sorry. He says this is fine. I just care about my wife now, but you made them. I mean, I forgive you. There's nothing like that. That would be cheesy, of course, but the fact that it's so coolly staged, right, makes me wonder if I don't think it's a New Testament movie, right? I think it's an Old Testament movie, and coming back full circle, the scene of prayer may be this prayer to this Old Testament God, dear God, it's eye for an eye. You made me suffer like Job or like Abraham or whatever, and now you must punish the real guy. I mean, he waits your punishment. That's I think how we may read it, because I don't know. I don't believe he's praying just to, I don't know, make new evidence appear or something like that. It's a striking scene, but yeah, you're right. It's interesting, and I wouldn't let's say I would like to leave this Kafkaesque sense here, right? Which of course points us in a different tradition. Richard Brody, as a Jewish American critic, also understands in a cultural sense this cosmic absurdity of existence that we have in Kafka, and I think that we have in this movie, right? So it may be Catholic in a very, maybe in a more profound sense, in a more complex sense.
Oh, I agree that it's a very complex issue here, and I love this reading with this Old Testament God. I don't know much about the screenwriter of the film, Maxwell Anderson, who is actually a very celebrated playwright, and he got a Pulitzer Prize, and he wrote, for example, Key Largo, which then John Huston made into a film. So maybe a bit of an answer would be there if we knew what was the philosophical mindset of Maxwell Anderson, but this is maybe in the future. But I totally agree about the scene of the confrontation that is not happening between Manny and those ladies who accused him, because they avoid his look. There's no moment of like, I'm so sorry that I did this. So I completely agree, which brings me to this issue of you just said it brilliantly. We don't, for the first 50 minutes, we don't know. Maybe he is guilty, like maybe he's just, I mean, he's Henry Fonda. So at this point, I guess we just assume that he's not guilty, because that's 10 years before Sergio Leone, cast him as this uber villain.
What a performance!
Yes, so,
what a performance!
Once Upon a Time in the West. But so I guess that by casting Fonda, Hitchcock was making sure that from the very start we will assume that he must be the title also gives it away, the wrong man. But the way it's shot, it's true that it's sometimes you don't even think about like where is the real criminal? Will there be another victim or not? So. But this brings me to maybe a final point. I mean, from the points that I wrote down, is, and I know that you agree because you mentioned it yesterday when we were introducing Vertigo at a lush screening room in the middle of Warsaw in Kinoteka. It was a wonderful experience. Just
200 viewers came for the screening.
This is just for the record that that screening happened, and we are talking in the wake of it. So yesterday you mentioned, and I wanted to mention as well, the most brilliant sequence in the film is when Manny comes to this insurance office and he wants to get the money, and the lady starts to suspect that he may be the guy who held up her colleague before, And this whole sequence is absolutely great because the way it's acted by everyone involved, by all those actresses especially, you can feel this delicate network of suspicion. Those wheels start to spin. And Hitchcock does something very un-Hitchcock-like in that it's not a misogynistic view of, hysterical women who are completely wrong and they are, they deserve mockery because, I can totally see that, him doing that in another film, that, they're just hysterical, their hysteria, disconnects them from the rational mind, and this is why they accuse him. Actually, no. The way it's directed, you can feel that for every one of them, it's a very painful, difficult moment because they are confronting their memory of this hold-up. One of them actually cannot look at the guy because she's still so traumatized. And I think this is one time in which Hitchcock lets go of his misogyny in a scene that would be very easy to use it, showing them, those three female friends at work, they don't know what they're saying, no.
Spinsters,
exactly. No, here, like every single word, when she comes to her, and then, don't look at over there, try to look. And of course, with Henry Fonda in the scene, I think it's beautifully handled, totally believable. And the film is not blaming these women. This is very important. It's not saying, this is their fault, No, it's the cosmos's fault, They were sincere in their thinking that, that was before cameras, CC cameras, and, before everything was recorded. So no, the film says, no, they really thought that this was the guy, and this happens,
I agree. Although I would say there is a grain of salt. I mean, I think there's this just one element that they weren't really there. It's all based on one or two of them seeing the guy 3 weeks ago, but suddenly 5 of them are convinced it's the guy. So I think there's just a grain of this. How easy it is to judge, right? It's also a Hitchcockian. How easy it is to, point to someone, and how difficult. But yeah, you're right, and I think it's a great sequence. It was striking yesterday, when I was revisiting the movie. How modern it feels, right? How modern in the way it's like very clearly structured, and maybe there is tone of Fritz Lang in The Wrong Man as well. We're looking for associations, and I remember David Thompson writing about Fritz Lang's 1940s movies. I remember this random sentence that men are trapped, diagonally or geometrically or whatever. That these movies are geometric, right? In Fritz Lang's American movies. And I think there is an element of that in the scene, which it's also pretty geometric with this distance between them, the window, these desks, and how camera moves, staying very close to, in an artificial way, staying close to these faces of these distraught women. I think it's brilliant and very, very powerful.
Well, you read my mind because 2 seconds before you mentioned Fritz Lang, I actually jotted down a small note here saying Fury, because the film,
yeah.
I think from 1936 with Spencer Tracy, Fritz Lang's film, actually does the exact thing that I just said Hitchcock thankfully doesn't do. Because in Fury, we have the scene of women talking and gossiping, basically putting blame on our character or on Spencer Tracy, and Fritz Lang cannot help himself, and he cuts very crudely to this several chickens clucking in the backyard, saying, those women who just talk and talk, like in the Music Man,
I see. I think we may say that, escaping from totalitarian state in the 30s, he could, and working in this 1930s mood of the people, he could do it. But look, in 1956, the same year, he makes Beyond the Reasonable Doubt, which I watched like several months ago, and it's a striking story about a very canny murderer.
I haven't seen it,
and it's
but
also
I
a
think
legal
it's in the
procedural.
Thompson book, right? The Thousand Films, or
I think it may
okay,
be.
okay,
I'm not sure. No, I don't
okay,
think it is. But there are many long
okay,
movies
okay.
there.
No,
Yeah. Maybe this one as well.
1940s and 1950s lang is still something that I need to look into, because I saw some of them, but not all of them. So this is something that I want to definitely watch. But so yeah, I'm just in awe of the sequence. I think it's one of the best sequences in the film. Definitely the shot when camera peeks into the cell when Henry Fonda goes into the cell. It's a very elaborate, very showy shot, which I think gave Brian De Palma some dreams, when he saw it as a little boy. And then him and Scorsese, they sometimes do shots like that, when camera goes through a peephole and goes back, because this is something about the scene. So, there are those showy moments. There are a few of them. But overall, I would say this is still a surprising film. I agree with Brody, a film that gives us a glimpse into a very particular mood in Hitchcock's head, which must have been there, since this film, brings it out so clearly. And I think to know Hitchcock, to really get to know him as an artist, I think this is an indispensable film. You have to know this film if you want to peek into the darkness behind, the fun. I think it's difficult to choose, the best Hitchcock films and stuff. But I would say, if I was putting up 10 films that really gives you the glimpse into his soul, The Wrong Man has to be there, because it's really different, but very true to the very nature of his art. This is my ultimate take. I don't know what you think of it.
I definitely agree. I think it gives us something that other movies don't. So I also don't have much more to say, despite I just wanted to add one bit of trivia about Henry Fonda. I didn't know actually that he had a 8-year or 7-year break from movies before coming back in Mr. Roberts by John Ford, and then The Wrong Man. So I think it's also striking in the sense that, American theaters are without Henry Fonda for large part of the decade, and then suddenly he comes back in this role, and I think it's a perfect double feature with 12 Angry Men, right? I mean, you mentioned this movie, and I think when you think about it, like there are like two different takes at the justice system. One movie was a great success. I think Hitchcock's wasn't like very successful, but these are like polar opposites in a way, in the sense that, do you believe in the process, right? Of course, we don't believe in the process in Hitchcock's movie, and then in 12 Angry Men, Henry Fonda becomes the face of the procedure, of the legal process. So I think it's very interesting that there is this double take. And also something we don't have to discuss, we didn't have time, but I also see a bit of melodrama in the way finally that Vera Miles is treated. I think it's both Hitchcock's film, but it's also 1950s melodrama with women losing their mind as a theme. I think it's culturally very evident here that it's a 1950s theme. Very strange, perhaps, for modern viewers, right? That it happens in such a way in this movie.
I agree, and I think we still only touched on how pivotal the role of the Vera Miles character is here, because if the film really touches something extremely dark, I would say it's this final scene when they are talking to each other and she's really disturbed. This is something that I think one should also keep in mind. And we didn't even mention the thing that many people start the discussion of this film with, which is that, of course, it dramatizes this childhood trauma of Hitchcock when he was locked up for 5 minutes in a police station in this joke by his father, which traumatized him. So I think this film actually replaced that trauma. So just for the record, it should be mentioned. And I would also, just for the sake of our love of good screenwriters, mention that the co-screenwriter of this film is Angus MacPhail, who worked with Hitchcock before. We mentioned him here when we hosted Charles Barr, and we talked about those wartime shorts that Hitchcock made, and this is a little bit touching because this was the final film that Angus MacPhail worked on. This was the final film of his filmography, and for any fan of British cinema, films like Whiskey Galore, for example, The Ealings, It Always Rains on Sunday, this is a guy who was behind those films. So just to honor the screenwriters of Hitchcock, I wanted to mention this, and this is a film that should be seen, I think. And if you look at the people that he made it with, Robert Burke, cinematography, Bernard Herrmann, composer, George Tomasini, editor, so exactly the guys that gave him this beautiful lush style of the 50s, and yet here they are working in a completely different mode, and this tells you that he was such a versatile filmmaker. So my verdict is go watch it as soon as you can.
Definitely, I agree. And Michał, we have only the highlights left in this podcast, because we've covered some. I mean, for Hitchcock fans, there is no an obscure Hitchcock feature, but we've covered some really forgotten ones from the 30s, some lesser work from the 40s, and The Wrong Man, I think, is the last, let's say, under the radar movie.
There's one film that remains problematic. Topaz, of course. Yeah, I don't know what we will do with this one.
It will be fun. It will be fun.
I'm looking forward to that episode, so we'll see when it happens. I just want to mention, and we mentioned it yesterday as well, that 2026 marks the 50th anniversary of the premiere of the final film by Hitchcock. So we are entering the 50th anniversary of Family Plot. My guess is we won't get there before the year ends, but just to mark the anniversary. 50 years ago, it was the last time when Hitchcock showed us a new film by Alfred Hitchcock. So just to make that point.
It's a beautiful anniversary.
Absolutely. So I just want to tell you that I have a bit of a stage fright before our next episode, because Vertigo is our next episode. How on earth will we tackle this masterpiece? I don't know. We have to talk
with a special guest. Hopefully
with a special guest. So just to mention this, that we are a bit nervous before tackling this masterpiece, but I think we'll be okay. So thank you so much for listening. Please spread the word among other Hitchcock fans. And any final thoughts for this episode, Sebastian?
Oh, if you're asking, then I didn't know that the actor that plays the lawyer is Sir Anthony Quayle. Of course, I know the face, but I didn't kind of know he was Sir, and he sounds like James Mason. I couldn't. It was so strange. His voice. Maybe that's because he's British as well. So.
It's nice that in this film about American injustice, a British man brings some justice with him. For me, Anthony Quayle will also always remain in my memory thanks to Lawrence of Arabia. So that's probably my favorite role of his. But yes, absolutely, a nice supporting role here. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Good luck with your upcoming premieres. And here to our listeners, please support us, please like our podcast, follow us. And this was the 44th episode of Foreign Correspondence.
Deeper into Hitchcock.